DC Comics Wonder Woman is one of the most iconic superheroes in the history of the comic book industry and has literally led a billion-dollar movie. But lately, that has not translated to success within the comic book industry, where the character was essentially derived, but has not thrived as of late. DC Comics, thankfully, are taking the character a bit more seriously right now. They have a lot of titles that are associated with Diana Prince, Wonder Woman, and some of the other characters through the Amazon lore. And they've got the Trial of the Amazons coming up in 2022. Will it be a success or will it not be? I have trepidations on this. There have been 2 interviews recently. One with, I think it was Newsarama, where they spoke to Wonder Woman writers Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad, and Nubia and the Amazons co-writer Stephanie Williams. There was a second interview with Den of Geek with the EIC of DC Comics, Marie Yavins, as well as Stephanie Williams as well. I'm going to concentrate on the Marie Yavins stuff there. And I'm going to go through these 2 interviews, and I'm going to highlight things that are good, and then I'm going to get into the bad stuff because it's not all good. I do have hesitation that this is going to be a success due to some of the decisions that they've made so far. And if you are unaware, my name is Wes. I'm the host of Thinking Critical YouTube. If you are interested in all the best comic book reviews and news, this is likely the channel for you. Do not forget to subscribe and definitely hit the bell for notifications. Now, getting into this, we've got the Trial of the Amazons that is going to be taking place within the pages of Wonder Woman, Wonder Girl, Wonder Woman, The Adventures of Young Diana, Nubia and the Amazons, as well as the Trial of the Amazons limited series itself. So it's actually quite large in scope, and it is going to be coming out in the not too distant future. There are good things and there are bad things about what they are saying within these interviews. We'll start out with the good first, because I want to be a happy camper. So the good thing, the first thing that I'll point out through these interviews, it does appear that the writers get that Wonder Woman needs more spotlight. This is what Michael Conrad had to say. I've seen comments and read articles about how the Wonder family hasn't gotten the kind of shine it deserves. Everyone working on these books wants to build out that mythology and further incorporate new and old faces alike. We hope this crossover goes well and that we can carve out a space to further explore some of the Amazons who don't currently have their own titles. That is important. Wonder Woman is vastly underserved within the DC Comics titles. Listen, every character takes a backseat to Batman, but really, Wonder Woman is part of the Trinity, and she should certainly be right up there with Superman, behind Batman. He is the flagship and the best-selling character within the industry. But we just don't see a lot of shine on the character. They do not spotlight. I mean, obviously, we did see Wonder Woman as the main hero within Dark Knight's death metal, but other than that, you just haven't seen it a whole lot lately. I think it's been 30 years since we had War of the Gods. That's like the last major Wonder Woman event that felt important. 30 years is a long time. There have been 2 Wonder Woman movies that were released in that time period. And they generate a lot of money. You would think that Wonder Woman would be a high priority character. They certainly are treating the character as if Diana Prince and Wonder Woman have enormous potential and importance in the future of DC Comics, and that is important. Whether they get it right or not this time, they need to feature the character, put more spotlight on Wonder Woman, her part of the universe, and treat her like part of the Trinity, like she should be. And so I'm happy with that, because Wonder Woman deserves better than she's been getting. We also, during the interview from Marie Yavins with the Den of Geek, portion of the interview, talks about kind of appreciating the past. This is what Marie Yavins had to say. My whole agenda is to build on things. One common approach people have is to reinvent. I'm not reinventing. We're just building on the past. That is perfect. There's been so much deconstruction within DC Comics, within Marvel Comics over the past 2 decades. A lot of these characters are unrecognizable. You have 80 years of wonderful history. Some of the best writers in the history of comic books have worked on this character and built things that need to be built upon rather than discarded and moved to the side and have something else built in place. I mean, how many times can we get a brand new Wonder Woman origin story? It gets a bit ridiculous after a while. So I do appreciate the sentiment from Marie Yavins there, saying that it's time to stop reinventing and start building on the past. That is important. I think that's one of the things that's really held the character back, is because we literally, whenever there's a new writer on Wonder Woman, it feels like you get a new origin. They just start erasing everything and trying to rewrite everything. I know we're in the good portion, but there is a little bit of bad here, and I have to acknowledge this from Yavins herself, because she does literally contradict herself. A couple paragraphs later in this interview, and there is a link in the video description to both of these if you want to check out the full interviews with these contributors to Wonder Woman and the EIC from DC Comics. This is what Yavins had, which is absolutely contradicts what Yavins had just said about appreciating the past. We are now focusing on stories of Amazons of color and trans Amazons in a world that is more ready to read about them, but they have always been there. Certainly there have been Amazons of color. Nubia's been there since the 70s. It's over 50 years. The first time we've ever seen trans Amazons was within the last month or two. They haven't always been there. You can't ignore the past. If you want to change things, you have to go within the lore, read up on Wonder Woman, and change it within the universe that already exists. Otherwise, it will be summarily rejected. And that's a problem. So I appreciate the sentiment of Marie Yavins, but she does, literally contradict herself a few moments later. Finally, this is the last good takeaway I have on this. When Marie Yavins is talking about Wonder Woman, Diana Prince herself, she's aspirational, of course, but that's a terrible but Wonder Woman was created with an eye toward human psychology. So she was created through the lens of the values of 1941 as a symbol of empowerment for women, an iconic ideal. She was complex at a time when heroes were traditionally very simple. She's half goddess, but she's got some very core human conflicts and values. She is a aspirational hero. I'm going to have to ignore a couple parts of this, but she isn't an aspirational hero. That needs to be celebrated. That needs to be embraced by the writers themselves. There appears to be what we're seeing in DC Comics right now, and there's certainly a built-in conflict between the Amazons of the Mascara and man's world. When they say man's world, I believe it's just the world that men reside in, that women are also there too. They have conflicts with them, but that is being absolutely built to the forefront, is this large level conflict. It's always been there, but part of the character's growth and arc is understanding that the man's world that they've embraced is flawed, but it's still worth fighting for. And that's what makes the hero really impressive and unique within DC Comics universe. I feel like they're trying to push that to the wayside, and instead of like man being like human, it's like just men's world and just kind of trashing men. We certainly saw that in Kelly Sue DeConnick's recent Wonder Woman Hysteria book. But she at least gets some core components of the Wonder Woman character, which is important, being the EIC. And it sounds like this is something that Marie Yavins thinks is very important. She's obviously out there talking about it. Now, there is a lot of bad. Well, there's enough bad. We need to get to talk about this. One of the really bad things holding this Trial of the Amazons back, it's a real detriment, in my opinion. There are literally no creative heavyweights on this book, other than maybe Jim Chung, who's doing the covers. The writers are Joelle Jones, probably the best known, but she's best known as a great artist. She's kind of a lukewarm, average writer at best. Michael Conrad, Becky Cloonan, Vita Ayala, Stephanie Williams, all C and D list writers. You look at the artists: Alita Martinez, Mark Morales, Emilio Lopez, and Becca Carey. A couple of decent artists in there, but nobody that's like a household name or even close to becoming a household name. Just putting a Wonder Woman event out there and saying, look, we care about the character, that isn't enough. You have to put somebody, a creator that puts, no offense, asses in seats. And none of these creators are doing that. Maybe Jim Chung, but like I said, he's doing the cover art. There's not a writer of note that really has a built-in fan base that's large enough to support this enormous crossover event. They've made a strategic blunder, not putting anybody of note on any of these Wonder Woman books, and then thinking that they can carry some type of event book. And, for that reason alone, I do think it's kind of destined to fail. But there's more bad about this. We go into the planning stage of this. We know DC Comics have been through a large amount of upheaval and a large amount of transition. And this is what Michael Conrad had to say about the planning that went into this event. We started talking about this in the spring of 2021. This story wouldn't have happened without Nubia and Yara. They were part of the plans from the beginning. This story has been percolating for less than a year. This is a major crossover event. This is encompassing 4 or 5 titles and its own standalone book. This needs at least a year of planning to execute it properly. They have not had enough time. And quite frankly, when you look at the writers or the creators that are associated with this, how many of them have ever executed anything at this scale successfully? Never happened. And I bet when we look at the editors associated with it, they haven't either, because none of them are associated with Batman. And that's the only character that's been getting this kind of love. Unless you're Scott Snyder, then you can do it with everybody. This is definitely like they needed a lot more headway to get in here and plan this correctly and execute it. I also believe that there are some very unreal expectations going along with the creative team. This is what Becky Cloonan had to say. Yeah, I have no doubt that the trial is going to cement Themyscira as a travel destination for readers up there with Gotham and Metropolis. Are you crazy? Like, everybody knows who Themyscira is. That's a core component, a key component of Wonder Woman's lore and mythology. But Wonder Woman doesn't really operate or live in Themyscira. That's somewhere that they go. Gotham is a supporting character to Batman. He's literally with that character almost in every issue of Batman. Metropolis is literally with Superman in almost every issue. That city has its own character, and certainly Themyscira does. But Themyscira will never be built up to the same place that Metropolis or Gotham can be, because you can't really live in that world for very long. Nobody's allowed to go in there. What is Wonder Woman just going to sit there and talk to people, and then maybe once a year somebody tries to invade and they repel them? It's just that is an unreal expectation that they would ever be able to lift Themyscira up to the level of Gotham and Metropolis just because of the nature of what that island represents in the key mythology. We're going to go back to Becky Cloonan, who I don't think had a good showing in this interview, and we're getting the same old promises. That is, the editors, the executives, the creators need to learn. You can't keep selling the same old goods, because after a while, it just becomes a tchotchke. Okay, you're just saying the same thing we heard for the last event. And this is what Becky Cloonan had to say. I know a lot of crossovers make the promise, after this, things will never be the same. But I promise you, with Trial of the Amazons, it's for real this time. The trial affects everything from events in Wonder Woman, Nubia and the Amazons, Wonder Girl, What Lies Beneath, the Bana Migdal backups that began in Wonder Woman 781, even Young Diana. I know you're thinking, but Becky, how in Hades does Young Diana connect to the Trial of the Amazons? I reply with a wink and a smile and a knowing wink. Young Diana and Wonder Woman have completely different audiences. Like, what are you expecting? Like, teen girls to go in and all of a sudden jump into this Trial of the Amazon book, or adults to go and read this book that, unless you're the hardest of the hardcore Wonder Woman fans, you don't want to read Young Diana. It does, even like, they're absolutely for different audiences. And who gives a crap about the Bana Migdal backups that begin in Wonder Woman 781? If it was important, it wouldn't be in backup. Like, I don't think they understand what the selling point is, and I think that they've gone a little bit too big as far as the scope of this and what's tying into it. Throw the backups out, forget about Young Diana, and create a really good story and see if you can sell people on it and get people excited about it. They're spreading it so thin, and they haven't had enough time to really execute it at the scale that they're trying to go with, that it's going to be like a house of cards. It's going to feel like Fear State all over again. You can tell James Tynion and all the Batman creators, they had like a couple of months maybe to get ready for that and do it, and it sucked because of it. And given the same old promises that it'll never be the same again, tell me how. Tell me how it's going to change. Tell me why I have to read it, because this is the exact same thing that everybody else in your publisher's been promising for years now, and it never comes to fruition. Never comes to fruition. It's hard to believe this stuff anymore. They need to come up with a better way to connect with their customers and let them know why it's important. Because at this point, it's the boy who cried wolf, right? I can only hear you say this is the most important event ever, and it's going to change the status quo for all times, to be followed up by another event 2 weeks later that completely ignores what just happened. Like, how does it do that? They need to get better with their messaging. That's the real problem, and that's obviously on the marketing and PR teams. But the creators are kind of part of the marketing and PR teams. They need to be better prepared for stuff like this and really learn how to sell a story instead of giving everybody the same old song and dance. Now, finally, there's an odd statement in here, and I mentioned at the beginning that there's been a lot of man hate within Wonder Woman, and that doesn't make all that it makes sense in the book, but it seems like it's been layered on extra thick. And this was just a really, really odd statement, in my opinion. Maybe you guys will feel differently about what Marie Yavins is saying here, but this was Marie's message. My mission statement for Wonder Woman and the Amazons ties into my general approach to comics. You can almost run a parallel of Themyscira with the comic industry. One of my talking points that I always go back to is that women have always been here. We are not new. Every single human being on this earth was brought to you by a woman. Everybody knows that women have always been here. A vast majority of us were raised by moms. Like, this idea that comic customers or the readership don't acknowledge that women exist is absolutely ludicrous. Wonder Woman has been around for 80 years. Has been one of the flagship characters for DC Comics for 80 years. It's not the reader's fault that DC Comics have let the character go by the wayside in favor of 40 Batman books a month. That's not our fault. She needs to take responsibility for their own actions and how this has happened. Now, she's newly minted EIC and was in charge the whole time, but that's your problem. You're the publisher. You're the executive in charge of all the plans. Everybody knows that women aren't new. Nobody thinks that Wonder Woman's new. Nobody thinks that Themyscira is new. Everybody knows that the Amazons have been there. Nubia has been around for 50 years. Now, if you don't understand that, how are you the editor-in-chief? This was really bad messaging and just something just odd and, quite frankly, stupid to put into this interview. It's contentious. It's talking down to your customers and kind of treating them stupid, in my opinion. Of course, you guys might have different takeaways from that, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts. I think it's important that Wonder Woman gets spotlight. I think it's important that they do a big crossover event and that it's successful. I just don't think Trial of the Amazons will be successful because they don't have good creative, they don't have good creators on the book or on the series or the event. Nobody of note, nobody that's going to put butts in seats. They have had little planning to do it. They have unreal expectations and they're promising the same old. But it's important, and I hope they do not, once this fails, turn their back on Wonder Woman and say, well, the readers just don't like Wonder Woman. No, the readers love Wonder Woman. They just want you to put out an honest effort and let us know that this is actually going to be important. When it's the Becky Cloonan, Michael Conrad, Vita Ayala, Stephanie Williams show, I know that it's not important. I'm going to check it out because I have a YouTube channel, but most of my viewers don't. And you got to sell them on this. And I don't think this worked. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.